Today, Neil will discuss this week's election and the ongoing conversation related to the results. And I could just say good luck, Neil, trying to make sense out of this chaos. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be posted on the college's website. Neil will speak for about 10 to 15 minutes or so, and then we'll take questions. There is a Q&A button on your screen, and would ask you to please feel free to submit questions via the Q&A button. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce Neil Levesque. Neil has long held leadership roles in politics and governance across New Hampshire, currently serving as the executive director at the nationally known New Hampshire Institute of Politics at St. Anselm College. Neil joined the Institute as its executive director in July of 2009 and has since hosted a variety of state and national events, including 5 presidential debates and numerous distinguished speakers such as Hillary Clinton and Mitt Romney. He is arguably the most quoted political expert in the state of New Hampshire, if not in all of New England. Now it is my pleasure to introduce my good friend, Neil Levesque.
Well, hello everyone, and thank you, Jim. Jim and I have been working quite a bit together since the start of the COVID, especially during COVID, dealing with all kinds of different things, not politics, with the safety of the student body here and other aspects of the college. So Jim, thanks for taking some time out today to join and work on this webinar with us. So guess what? I can't necessarily tell you everything that you haven't already seen on the television set in the last 48 hours, but I'll just give you some highlights about things that I think that you need to be thinking about, we need to be thinking about, and that is this. Here are the facts. We know that we have had absolute record turnout in this country. We have an incredible amount of civic engagement. We have all these people who have now sort of invested in their candidate. And so what do I mean by that? If you get in your car on a Tuesday morning and you drive to the polls in Springfield, New Hampshire, and you're going to vote for Donald Trump or for Biden, you are now invested in this election. And half of the people are going to be disappointed by the result. I'm sorry to say it, but it's true. And I think at this point in time, we don't have any clear, defined answer to what we've been waiting for at least a year, maybe longer. And so as a result, we're in a bit of turmoil. What do I think is going to happen moving forward? We've known all along that people who walked into the polling sites, with the exception of African Americans, generally are Trump supporters, or it leans Trump. And that those, particularly here in New Hampshire, who mailed in their ballots, who voted absentee, lean Democratic. Just in the primary itself, the amount of people who took primary ballots who were Democrats was about triple what it was for Republicans. So, you know, you could interpret this one way or another, that Democrats are more fearful of voting in person, therefore they're mailing it in. So now the early returns in some of these states showed Trump up, and now as we're counting the mail-in ballots, that is likely to sort of shift. Because of that, the Trump campaign has now employed all of these legal folks to different states. One of our friends here at the Institute of Politics, Corey Lewandowski, has been sent to Philadelphia, and they're going to try to stop the counting of those mail-in ballots in those different locations. A lawsuit was just filed in Nevada, I think in the last 30 minutes, to try to look at thousands of voters and whether or not they actually qualify to be voters in the state of Nevada. So there's going to be all this legal action. The reason why the Trump campaign is doing all this legal action, it is likely at this point that the 264 number that Biden is at is likely to get over 270, according to the Associated Press. Now, why? To a lot of us, maybe the Associated Press calling a race or a state for a presidential candidate means a lot. But to conservatives, the words Associated Press might as well be CNN calling the race. It's not a credible source for conservatives. And so I think that there'll be more division that, oh, look, the big national media outlets are again trying to throw the race towards the left. So I think there's going to be a lot of people who say that somebody stole this or they cheated or whatever reason. There'll be a lot of people disappointed in the outcome in what happens. I do not think that if the Associated Press calls Nevada, for example, tonight, and it gets Biden over the 270 number, that the Trump campaign is going to stop these lawsuits and he's going to concede defeat. I think that the objective here is to start at these lower courts and start to move up as fast as they can to the Supreme Court. The president basically showed his cards on election night when he said he wanted to go to the Supreme Court. The Republican Party obviously would think that they would have a good shot in a conservative court for some sort of a victory. That would be where they would take their bet. Interestingly, I'm reading the brand new book by James Baker, or about James Baker, who, as you remember, ran George W. Bush's recount effort in Florida in 2000. And at that point, they knew already, right when they flew to Florida to take this effort over, that they were going to go to the Supreme Court. And they knew that that's where their best case outcome would come from. The Florida Supreme Court, as you remember, was all Democrats, and Democrats had appointed them. So they wanted to go over that. And they did, and they were successful. So I think right now the legal teams for Trump are getting ready to push this, which means that we may not have a real significant closure on this for quite a while. I'll tell you a couple quick things about, because everybody right now across the country is saying the same things. I think there was a headline in the New York Post that said wrong, wrong, wrong. And it's about polling. It's today's New York Post. It's about polling. It says wrong, wrong, wrong. Well, let me just say, as proud alums of St. Anselm College, that we now have a fully operational survey center, which is almost revenue neutral at this point. People buy questions, companies buy questions. Our polling was spot on, completely spot on. So we are very proud of that. We had Biden up by 8 points in New Hampshire. That was what he won by, pretty consistent. And we picked all of the congressional delegation and the governor's race very successfully. We're proud of our polling, but I'm going to tell you something, because as you look at these stories about polling and they say, you know, this is the end of polling, that's baloney. The people that poll the most are actually candidates, and they will continue to poll because they want to know where the electorate is. But I will tell you this, that we have been struggling, and I'm starting to openly talk about this now that the election is over. I was very frustrated by this. We have national news outlets that would email us and actually question us on how we're going to weigh different age groups and different demographics. And unless we weigh those age groups the way they say they should be weighed, rather than our statisticians here, they won't put our poll up on national television. And we decided we weren't going to change what we did. By the way, they were wrong. That national news organization was wrong, and we were right. But the interesting thing about this, and the reason I mention it, is it's one way for someone to put their thumb on the scale and to have an outcome that they want to see. So I'll just give you a quick example. If you weigh 18 to 29-year-old age group more heavily than we do, you will have a different outcome. So in the presidential primary, maybe younger voters are more inclined to vote for Bernie Sanders. And in the general election, maybe younger voters are more inclined to vote Democrat. And we don't do that. We weigh them the way that we believe that the turnout will be. And as a result, we're sanctioned by a lot of these national media companies. Maybe not anymore, that we were right and they were wrong. So we're pretty excited here at the Institute. I'll also tell you that on election night, we had as many students as we could have in the big auditorium, watching the screens, seeing what was going on. You know, it's a COVID world, so we have to limit the numbers a little bit, but we had a very energetic group, a great group of students. You know, some of course were a little disappointed that their candidate didn't get to declare victory that night, but generally Students all get along very well. We had a good night. We've seen a lot in this 4 years leading up to Tuesday, and we hope to continue that. We're going to move forward here with some new initiatives at the Institute of Politics and really start to sort of shore up the fact that we have every facet of politics all going on here at the New Hampshire Institute of Politics. Research, polling, speakers, television studio, student engagement, all the different aspects of politics are going on here. And we're very, very proud of it. So that being said, I see we have 9 questions, Jim. I can't imagine. The first one is, who's going to win?
Yeah. Well, Neil, thank you again for your insightful thoughts on the election. So we do have a number of questions. Also an update. I just noticed that CNN just announced that Nevada, that Biden's lead increased to 12,000 votes. So Neil, I don't know if you're watching that race closely, but maybe, some thoughts on, both Nevada and some of the other states like, Pennsylvania and Arizona and some of the other key battleground states, and where you think they're going to end up.
Well, I think that Nevada is going to end up for Biden, and I think that the Trump campaign knows that. That's why they're trying to go and discount. I think it's 6,000 votes. They're going to go to try to say that they don't count. These are political tactics. They're using the legal aspect now, but it's politics, and they're going to go and try to do what they can to win those states for their bosses. Pennsylvania, is pretty solidly Trump, it seems, except they're counting all those ballots, and particularly around Philadelphia. There's one report that they've stopped counting mail-in votes in Philadelphia at this point. So I don't know what to read into that. But I think some of these states, again, as I mentioned in the beginning about the mail-in phenomena, I don't want to speculate as to why. Maybe people who are Democrats are more concerned with COVID and they decided to do a mail-in ballot. But we've definitely seen across the country where mail-in ballots tend to favor the Democrat. And it's not a fraudulent thing. It's just, and again, in our primary here, I think it was 80,000 Democrats took a primary, decided to mail it in. And I think it was 20,000 Republicans. So there's just a big disparity on who shows up at the polls and who would like to do an absentee ballot.
Great. All right. So Neil, our next question is from, and we have, welcome to all of our alumni and friends joining us in New England and from around the country. And our first question comes from good friend Len DeLuca in New York City. And Len asks, how does the National Democratic Party approach the new voters in the 2020 election, white working class families that voted Democrat until 1968, and regain the working class representation, and leave it up to a Boston College grad, a double eagle, to ask such a long-winded question. So Neil.
Okay, the objective of political parties is to win. And a lot of people forget that, libertarians seem to forget that, is that if you want to win, you've got to get together with people you don't necessarily love and try to coax them in and get to 51%. And so I think that the Democrats, looking back, even if Biden wins, I think they're going to look back and think that they might have overshot on that working class Pennsylvania Rust Belt former Democrat that's really a Trump Republican at this point, and see that they've lost that voter. And there are reasons why. And a lot of it could be just the optics of the fact that when you're talking about the Green New Deal, you're anti-fracking, all kinds of different things that give people the perception that you're not with them, you'll have this kind of shift. Trump has definitely taken over that sort of Rust Belt, blue collar union guy or woman, and he's mastered that. But Trump and the Republican Party have lost this sort of intelligent, highly educated person in the Northeast. They've completely lost them. So in gaining some factions, they've lost others. But I think Democrats need to start talking to those voters. And I thought that Biden was going to be able to do it because he was from Pennsylvania. He closed at a union shop, if you recall. But I don't think necessarily he did. I think, again, if he does pull this off, there'll be sort of a dissection. The days of Bill Clinton and trying to go a little bit into the center to capture the country as a whole, I think might be over. And thank you, Len, for the question. And by the way, save me the New York Post if you can today. Wrong, wrong, wrong. I got to put that up on the wall.
Neil, speaking of which, when the Yankees collapsed back in 2004 against the Red Sox, one of our trustees sent me the copy of the New York Post, actually, and it said the choke is on us, actually. So it'd be great if Len could send you today's New York Post. The next question is from one of our alums from New Jersey, and it has to do with counting votes. Why don't we just have early voting and count the votes the week before Election Day, perhaps even all of October? We've seen some states who are great at it, like Florida, and others that, like Pennsylvania, that it's a complete nightmare.
Because there will be leaks, and those leaks will sway people's vote as we go into an election. So polling, you really can't control, but when polling shows a landslide for one candidate or the other, it definitely affects the election. But if people were to count ballots beforehand, there would be leaks. I found out way in advance how many Democrats and how many Republicans were taking ballots in certain towns and cities in New Hampshire ahead of time, ahead of the Democratic primary, just because, people talk. And if somebody has a big lead in a certain area, that is likely to leak out and would be advantageous to one side or the other. But there's no reason why you can't count on that day. That's one thing that I don't get. In one county, that's a disputed county right now, they have what they call an administrative day, and they've stopped counting the ballots, which is just perplexing to me. Here in New Hampshire, we do things very old school, and we count on that day. If you submit, if a town receives a ballot that was mailed up until 5 o'clock on election day, it is to be counted. And we count them all, and we report our numbers. They were done by Wednesday morning. So I don't understand why other places continuously screw this up. Whether, you think after Florida in 2000, we would have all figured out how we're going to do this. But this is what happens when states control it. And some states are poorly run, frankly.
Right. Neil, next question has to do with national polling groups. And again, Neil, you and your team, you got it right. But this person writes, it's clear that once again, nearly all of the national polling groups, particularly those employed by the mainstream media, got the polling wrong again in all capital letters. One example this person writes about is the U.S. Senate race in Maine. Not one poll ever showed that Senator Collins was leading. Some polls showed her consistently behind by double digits, yet she's the one who won the election by 9 points. So first question is about the polling. And then when are these outfits going to be held accountable for getting it wrong on a consistent basis?
Well, I think that the accountability comes from people who, and their own credibility. So if you watch a news station and you know that news station has been reporting for 2 months that there was going to be a landslide by the Democrats and their polling proved it, I think that you maybe, the credibility of that news organization is really on the line. I think, in the case of these Senate races, Maine's just one example. Lindsey Graham, was going to lose, and there's other ones as well. What ends up happening is it demoralizes your base. So if your polls, if you're showing upside down in the polling and you're the candidate, people are not really willing to come out. They think, you're a dead man walking. And the other thing it does, and this is the most significant thing, is the other team sends it out and says, we're going to win, but we really need you to send us $100 to make sure we win. And so the fundraising really goes upticking when you're down in the polls. And a lot of the Washington political action committees, they sit back going into those final weeks of the campaign, and they have a pile of money, and they look at all these races and they look at all these polls. And if you're upside down, the Republican National Committee may not come in on your race and spend that $1 million that we thought you were going to get. And they do it all the time. They promise, and then they sit back and wait, see how well you're doing. So these polls can really screw up a campaign. And I think that there should be accountability. You know, I have since about 7 this morning been doing television and radio interviews. And the polling thing is the topic number one, obviously, besides the obvious picture of the map right now.
Right. Well, Neil, speaking of polling, someone asked the question, how would you rate the different polls? So, you know, for example, 538.com. I mean, if you were, you know, Neil Levesque getting ready for, you know, one of your many interviews, you know, which polls do you tend to look to on a regular basis?
So I don't necessarily look at the brand, although the brand does factor into it. But what I do look at is how long is the poll? You know, is it a 50 question poll that's going to take 50 minutes? Because let me tell you something, you know, if you're polling a single mom who has 2 kids who are hungry and she just came home from work, she's got to cook dinner, she's got a lot of stuff going on, and somebody calls her and says, would you sit down for 30 minutes and answer questions? She's not going to do that. And so the only 2 kinds of people that are going to answer that kind of long-winded poll, and pollsters love to put every mundane question you could imagine in, the only people who are going to answer that are people who are really politically motivated and people who have nothing better to do. So, you know, you're getting a skewed result. So I think that short polls work. And I like some pollsters that go and dig a little bit deeper into the data. Every single one of us, you too, Jim, there's a Jim Flanagan is in our database. There's 1,000 points of data that relate to Jim Flanagan. So for example, does Jim Flanagan have a hunting and fishing license? Does he drive a Chevy pickup truck? Does he go shopping with his wife on Saturday at Bed Bath & Beyond? If I looked at the data, you can find out everything about a person. And I'm sorry, it's true. And when my wife goes up to the Dick's Sporting Goods checkout and they say, can I have your phone number? That's what they're doing. They're adding it, they're selling it to that data company. And that piece of data then is purchased by us. And we go in and we find the different subsets of data as to what we want to put into this poll. And that's how it works. So there's you know, technology has really helped us. Let me tell you another thing that we do is that we were doing polling from, many of you have been into the Institute of Politics, the fishbowl room that you can see with the glass. We set it up. There's 10 stations. They all have headsets on. They're students. They're about 3 days. And they all, you know, they're asking questions of the people who are participating. That obviously has ended because of COVID. We can't stick them all in that one room. So what we've done is we've gone to text messaging. And it's become, we get a much bigger sample size. We find that people are more truthful because there's not the social desirability bias. And what is that? That is, Jim is asking me who I'm going to vote for. And I think Jim is a Trump person, so I'm going to answer Trump. And that happens all the time with surveys. So there's a bias there, and it doesn't happen with the text message. So you get the text, you answer the quick poll, and then it sends back in. We're quadrupling the number of our surveys at this point in our sample size. So you know, the proof is in the pudding. The proof is in the pudding that we had an accurate result for our polling here at the New Hampshire Institute of Politics.
Right, and that was a hypothetical by Neil about Jim being a Trump person. I definitely don't have a hunting and fishing license. Golf license, yes. And by the way, I carefully selected my tie today. I have a red and blue tie on today, actually. So anyway, the next question is, how do you, back to polling, how do you incorporate the St. Anselm undergrads into the creation of poll questions? And most importantly, or more importantly, the learning process of the sample canvassing, et cetera?
That's a great question, because that's what this is all about, right? I mean, we could just hire out a polling company and have them pay them to do polling, but we do it in-house here, and we incorporate the students and the faculty in the things that we do. So the faculty may be doing research and they say, hey, we want to ask this a series of questions, and we'll add those questions. We'll also do that for a student that, say, is doing their thesis and they want to ask a serious group of people a certain question. So we'll provide them with that kind of research. But I'll tell you what it really does. If you're watching this today, I can't remember, I think the movie was Say Anything, when I think it's John Cusack said, I don't want to sell, when I grow up, I don't want to sell anything, I forget what the quote is, buy anything that's sold, sell anything that's bought. And they went through this whole thing. Now, every single one of us, if we're employed, really is selling something, right? So it could be a widget, a stock, or a candidate. And the first thing that you do is you do a poll to test your customer base and find out what it is they're thinking about, what they think of you and your product. So the first thing you do when you decide to be a candidate, you start a campaign, if you're smart, you do a poll and you find out what your constituents and voters care about. And so when they leave here, if they have a general understanding of how polling data comes in, how to read the crosstabs, how to look at a polling book, it's so very valuable, but not just for politics. If they go out and they sell widgets, it's the same thing.
Right. Say Anything, quote, greatness, Neil. That's all I have to say. One of my favorite movies. Next question is, President Trump won Maricopa County, Arizona in 2016. It appears that Vice President Biden will take it this year. How significant do you think that Cindy McCain's endorsement was of Vice President Biden?
I think her endorsement was significant, not necessarily. I think what it said was, if you've been a longtime Republican, it's okay to vote this time for Biden. And from some Republicans that I've spoken to who are, I have former party chairs and two former congressional people, one former US Senator, Republican conservatives who voted for Biden. And I've asked them, what's it like? And it's hard. It's sort of like Jim Flanagan going into the Yankees, dugout, not wearing his Red Sox jersey. That's your team. It's always been your team. And here you are going in and voting for the top of the ticket, which you've never done. Our former chair, Steve Dupree in Concord, was John McCain's best friend, essentially. He voted for Biden and really announced it at the end. And he said it was the first Democrat for president that he voted for in 48 years. So I think it was an unusual feeling, but people and parties change. And there are plenty of Democrats that voted for Trump, as we've seen, because the country is so evenly split at this point.
Right. Next question is, how does the Republican Party balance trying to stop the counting in Pennsylvania while at the same time arguing that they should be maintaining the counting in Nevada?
Okay, so the first thing I'm going to tell you, and particularly if you were a student here, the answer to this is, if you're looking to escape hypocrisy, politics is not the business to be in. Okay, so the hypocrisy is, the students always come up to me and they go, well, they said this last year and now they're saying the complete opposite. Yes, that happens. National Public Radio had a pretty good thing this morning where they were recording the protesters outside of the polls who at one location were saying, stop the counting, stop the counting. And then the same political party was across the nation saying, count every vote, count every vote. So, it's that kind of thing. I don't see how you really can balance it. And I think when it comes down to it, the courts are going to sort of see through this a little bit. And they'll probably, but anything right now that the Trump campaign can do to sort of stop the car from rolling backwards, I think that they're going to try to do. And some people will view it as they're trying to steal the vote or stop the counting of the vote. But if you're a conservative Republican who's a Trump supporter, you're seeing it the other way. And it's just the way that we see things is usually through this political view. And you're seeing it as sort of the national media, AP, and some other groups trying to steal this away from from the Trump administration.
The next one is certainly not a softball. I'll say that. If Vice President Biden wins and becomes the next president of the United States, will New Hampshire's place as the first in the nation primary be in jeopardy?
Okay, well, that's a great question. So Biden finished fifth here, and he didn't really campaign here. His campaign said, we're going to basically have as little interaction with voters as we possibly can and sort of ride out the fact that we're the vice president, former vice president, and see what happens until we get to South Carolina. And he was a very successful tactic, but he didn't do the thing. So he did not do our signature politics on eggs. He's one of the few people who didn't do it. And he didn't come here very much. He came here for debates and things like that. That's because it's not something about St. Anselm. It's that they didn't want voter interaction. The pandemic, to some degree, as tragic as this sounds, probably was to the benefit of a candidate that is running in that way. Staying in the basement and reading off a teleprompter benefits a candidate that is like that. So there's not a lot of love there for the New Hampshire primary for Joe Biden. If Joe Biden becomes president, he may try to do something to change the primary process. That's within his realm. This is what I do know, is that if he wins, there's going to be a crop of Republican candidates all coming into New Hampshire by about January. And when they do, they're going to be campaigning here. And the expectation is that we're going to have this primary. So the candidates sort of speak with their feet and come here. And if there's a change and Democrats want to change that, they want to try to do that, that will be up to them. But I still think that you'll have plenty of candidates coming into the state and that our primary will survive that.
Right, good. We have a few more questions now. The next one has to do with what is the standing, in your opinion, for any suit in the Supreme Court?
Well, I think that people have standing if they can prove, if they can get a couple of voters, say in Nevada, and they had some on their press conference today, that say somebody else took my ballot. I never even got to vote, but the voting, records show that I voted and they denied me the right to vote. Or that Jim Flanagan, who lives in Nevada, doesn't really live in Nevada. He hasn't been there for the entirety of the pandemic. He's in California. If they can prove some of that, I think that it'll get them through the front door. And the more the appeals they go, the higher up the food chain they go. I think that that's what they want. The expectation is that the Supreme Court would be favorable to them. I actually disagree. I think as much as you have the Bush versus Gore example, I think that was much more clear cut, and I think that these things are a lot more. They're not clear cut, and they're not as good standing cases, frankly.
Right. Neil, the next question has to do with the U.S. Senate race and the fight for control of the U.S. Senate. This person writes and talks about how confusing it is to you Google the results of the U.S. Senate, and you have potential runoff races in Georgia, the one in North Carolina, actually in Michigan, I guess hasn't been called one way or the other. So what are your thoughts? Will we know by the weekend whether or not the Republicans have 51 seats, or whether or not it's going to end up in a 50-50 split, or will we have to wait until January for the two runoff races in Georgia?
I think by Friday afternoon, we're going to really know something. Obviously, we have to wait until there's some runoff elections. But I think generally, Mitch McConnell had a press conference yesterday. He didn't want to admit that he was going to be remaining as the majority leader, but you could sort of see it. And I think that they know that they have the votes at this point. And so I don't see that there's going to be a flip there, which is a big thing. So as you'll recall, 2 months ago, there was all this discussion that Biden was going to win. There'd be a big blue wave, and they'd be stacking the court, that they'll be bringing in U.S. senators from Puerto Rico, bringing in states, Puerto Rico and Washington, D.C., and therefore they have a good chance of bringing in more Democratic U.S. senators, all this stuff. And obviously that would not happen under Mitch McConnell. So I am, though, I am heartened by what I hear from Biden so far in the fact that he talks about trying to be president of the United States for all people. And I think that one thing that we forget in politics is it feels good when our team wins, but when we spike the football on the coach's head, the other team coach's head, we have to remember that it's still the first quarter and we have 3 more quarters to go to play against an angry team. And people forget that. Politics is the long game. And every time, let's say Trump had a victory and he spiked the football, that kind of created more and more anger from the other side. And I'd say the same thing about Harry Reid. You know, Harry Reid got rid of the filibuster. I think, you know, clearly that showed, you know, he had many other sort of situations where he didn't have to be that partisan. And I think that Barack Obama, he had come into this, there are no red states, there are no blue states, there's just the United States. But then they passed the Affordable Care Act 6 months later with not a Republican vote. So I'm heartened by the fact that I think that Biden, instead of taking this sort of partisan spike the football approach, that's so far since Tuesday night, he's been very, very much someone who is trying to talk about bringing everybody together. It's a tough goal, but I think you got to set the example someplace, right?
Right.
And I think it's a good place for him to go. And I think it also says, hey, you know what? That guy's not a socialist, as the people on the, you know, the people who are firing up the right are saying that guy's a socialist, extreme, Green New Deal, destroy America. And if he doesn't start to do this stuff, and he seems reasonable and sort of conciliatory to both sides, he's gonna, a lot of people will say, boy, he's not that bad. You know, he you know, that's not socialist, you know. And I think that would probably do a lot to sort of calm the waters.
Neil, just 2 more. Speaking of calming the waters, this person asks, how does the Republican Party, assuming that President Trump loses, escape President Trump and I would say that, you know, the negativity and so forth, and keep the voters he attracted in 2016 to 2020?
So again, you know, if you're going to remain a party, you need to attract voters. And there's a really good example of this, that in 1964, there was a big blue wave and Lyndon Johnson swept. The stories that were in the newspaper at the time were, are we a one-party nation? And the Republican Party could barely pay the light bill in Washington, D.C. and for their headquarters. Speed it up 4 years later, and Nixon's in the White House. And so there's a lot of things that happened that really transformed that party. The other thing that happens is that the party in power tends to fall all over themselves and sort of go a little too extreme. That turns off the voters as well. I think if there is a post-Trump era, I think that it's interesting because I think his son, Donald Jr., will probably get into politics, and his endorsements and the endorsements of some highly, you know, high-profile Trump people will probably still matter. And I think Pence will sort of carry on that mantle because Pence will be running for president starting in January. There's no doubt about it. But I think that the party does need to sort of evolve a little bit, and you know, parties that lose tend to do that because it's a survival mode.
Right. Neil, just to go a little bit more, we all know that all politics is local. So if we can just switch to a local question about our great state of New Hampshire, and particularly one about your good friend. What do you think the next move will be for Governor Sununu? And it's funny, Neil, because we were talking about this before the webinar went live. Do you see a Senate run in the future for Governor Sununu?
So today is Governor Sununu's birthday, so special day for him. I said that he didn't need to get any present because the voters gave him a big present on Tuesday. The interesting thing is in the election, even though New Hampshire went for Biden by 8 points, it overwhelmingly went for Sununu. And Sununu's coattails brought in a New Hampshire Republican state Senate, a state House, it looks like, and an executive council. That executive council is very important if you want to do any kind of judicial nominations, etc. So it really gave him the thumbs up for his leadership through the COVID situation. He is a very popular politician right now in New Hampshire. He's at a 68% approval rating. In 2 years, though, I don't know what'll happen. Remember, George Herbert Walker Bush had a 78% approval rating or even higher. Maybe it might have been in their early, small 90s after the first Gulf War. And he was defeated just a short time later by Bill Clinton. So I think that things change quickly. If he were to want to run for the Senate, it would be his to run. He'd probably be unopposed against Maggie Hassan. But I don't think he will do that. I think that he likes being a chief executive, and the thought of him being in the US Senate down in Washington, D.C. on a Thursday night, waiting an hour to cast a vote while his family is back here, his young family, I don't see him doing that. I would not be surprised if he left to run some big company, or if Trump is reelected, if he got some big appointment. So those would be the two things that I would look for Sununu. But certainly if he decided to, he would have the opportunity, that's for sure.
Right. Well, thanks, Neil. And again, a special thanks. We're going to ask one more question. But before asking the other question, I just want to thank all of our alumni, parents and friends, and people from the St. Anselm community who joined us here today for this informative webinar. And again, special thanks to Neil Levesque. Neil, it's just great to hear your thoughts and your insights on one of my favorite sports. So the final question, I'm going to ask you to go out on a limb, Neil. Who will be the next president of the United States? And more importantly, when will we know the final election results?
I think Joe Biden is going to win the election, and I think that he'll be declared by the weekend. Maybe I have Fox News on in the background, because I actually, if I'm looking for that kind of information, I'm waiting for Fox to say something. But I've been doing interviews like this all day, and I've been worried that, they would declare Nevada for somebody in the middle of my speech, because then we'd have to, plug off and I'll go watch the television. But I think by this weekend, but that's not going to settle these court cases. I don't know how long these court cases are going to take, or appeals. But I don't see that we're going to have like some concession speech by Donald Trump by Saturday morning by any means. And things could change. I'm not picking sides, but that's what I think. And I'd like to thank you, Jim, too, and all of you who are watching. It's funny because when I graduated from college with a political science degree, at the time, the business of politics was very different. And my father, who's a dentist, said, I don't know what you're going to do. I guess you could work at a fast food restaurant or something like that. I mean, what do you do with a political science degree? And the truth is that this is something that is really front and center on all Americans' lives. Right now, you can turn on any television station. This is what's capturing America. People are watching this, they're engaged, and it's great. We had a fellow here years ago, E.J. Dionne. A lot of people know who he is. He wrote a book called Why Americans Hate Politics. I totally disagree with him. Americans love politics. They hate the other side, but they love politics. And we're going to see that people are very engaged in the next month or so when this transpires.
Thank you again, Neil. Have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.